In a world where insanity reigns supreme and safety pin manufacturers are running out of metal for the diapers of the leftists, it's comforting to know an ancient, fat, long-haired, bearded reprobate has your mind in mind. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, broadcasting behind enemy lines in occupied California, and despite every attempt by the SHR Media Network to revoke his shameless contract, we return to the bloviating Zeppelin's Berserk Bobcat Saloon.
I have come here to chew bubblegum and kick ass, and I'm all out of bubble.
Oh my God, what a night. Welcome to Simone. Welcome to Mike, already in chat. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, welcome to the bloviating Zeppelin's Berserk Bobcat Saloon radio show, live and direct from the SHR Media studios, where I am broadcasting behind enemy lines in occupied California. That's spelled with a K, please. You got a belly up to the bar, we've kept your seat, and it's great to see you back. Tonight is Thursday, September the 5th, the year of our Lord 2019 already. My God, Blaine is going to be your bartender tonight. He pours with the best of them, and the lava lamp is in fact lighted to my right, your left, indicating that you can listen and enter the chat room at shrmedia.com. If you want to watch on video, go to the SHR Media YouTube channel or the SHR Media Facebook page. I got to tell you this, we don't water our drinks, just like we don't water our conversation, politics, religion, crime, culture, economics, race, sex, science, law. We talk about it all here at the saloon. Nothing is sacred, the speech is free, but the booze is not. All we ask is that you flush the toilet, jiggle the handle. Don't forget to tip your waitress. Tonight we have got a stellar act. It's the act you've known for all these years. No, it's not Sgt. Pepper. It's somebody better. Ed Morrissey is going to be in the first hour. In the second hour, we're going to talk about how criminologists, they got it all wrong. And of course, there'll be happy stories, crazy stories, wacky stories, bountiful stories. So welcome to the saloon, one and all. I greatly appreciate your being here. We have an additional 2 viewers who will not be unmasked because we're not the United States government. We don't unmask people here. Just thought I'd tell you. So tonight is a first here in the saloon. So I'd like to introduce a gentleman who, in my estimation, requires an introduction because these days so much can be forgotten in the course of, I don't know, say 10 or 15 years. Because, quite frankly, in my inestimable, that's not easy to say, my inestimable estimation, okay, there we go, we owe him. Now, Moore's law says that the number of transistors in a dense integrated circuit doubles about every 2 years. And in my experience, that could be applied to blogs and websites as well. So as a result, we as bloggers and conservatives, we may tend to forget the people that put down tracks before us and to whom we owe a great deal of gratitude, a debt of gratitude. We also know that some of those people actually survive today. Tonight, we'll be talking to one of those folks, even stronger than before. So tonight, I have the extreme pleasure of introducing one of the true trailblazers of the blogosphere to everybody here in the Berserk Bobcat Saloon, and that would be Ed Morrissey, the original owner and writer at Captain's Quarters, and these days owner and operator of HotAir.com. Ed Morrissey, please welcome Ed Morrissey to the Berserk Bobcat Saloon, ladies and gentlemen.
BZ, thanks so much for having me.
Ed Morrissey, first and foremost, because I want to make sure that people understand where you come from, where you can be seen and read. So can you give folks your social media, your websites, and maybe tell us about your own radio show? You've got one.
Sure, yeah. Yeah, no, hey, thanks very much. Well, I write at hotair.com. That's actually owned and operated by SHR Media Group through the Town Hall Media subsidiary. It was started by Michelle Malkin, I want to say 13 years ago now, I guess, almost 13 years ago. I joined up about a year and a quarter after they started it up, and I've been there ever since. So that's since March of 2008. And that's about the same time I closed down Captain's Quarters because I was moving over to Hot Air. And when I started Hot Air, I started that in October 2003. So I'm coming up to 15 years in the blogosphere now. And so if you're looking for what I'm writing, you can go to hotair.com. I'm also a weekly columnist at theweek.com. And I've been doing that, I think, for about 9 or 10 years now. Man, I'm old. I mean, I'm saying these things like, holy cow! You know, the longest I think I ever had a job before I went to Hot Air was, I think, 9.5 years. You know, that I held one job, and and I've been there for 11 plus now. So I mean, that's something. And I have my own podcast. I think it's the longest continuous surviving conservative blog-based podcast. It's the Ed Morrissey Show, and I actually started that at Captain's Quarters when I was doing some work for Blog Talk Radio, and then I moved it over to Hot Air, and it's been on a couple different platforms over there. Right now it's on Facebook, and we embed it and stream it through hotair.com as well. So you don't have to be on Facebook to watch it. That's Tuesdays and Thursdays, 4 p.m. Eastern Time. Generally lasts about 60 to 90 minutes, depending on how lazy I am about getting guests. I mean, let's be honest, BZ. I mean, let's just let us all hang out, man.
Hell yes. We'll get to blogging, and I definitely want to get to that, but because this is the first time in the saloon, I'd like people to get to know you a little bit. Where were you born and raised, Ed Morrissey?
I was actually born and raised in Southern California. So I was behind enemy lines, too, although it wasn't enemy lines at the time.
No, they were free then.
This was, I used to joke around that I escaped in a hot air balloon during the Gray Davis regime, which is actually not all that inaccurate. That's when I left, was about that time. I was born in La Mirada. I grew up in Cerritos, which are suburbs on the southeastern end of Los Angeles County, for those of you with maps, and a whole lot of time to do nothing better than to look up Cerritos and La Mirada. And I was living in Orange County for most of my adult life before I moved to Minnesota. I was in Huntington Beach when we moved out. So, Surf City, I left.
First, I want to point out for folks so that they get a little bit of a reference, because I remember this stuff. La Mirada, according to my taxed brain housing group, is not far from Knott's Berry Farm in Buena Park and Disneyland in Anaheim. So you were like right next door to these two big, great amusement parks at the time. Did you go?
Oh, all the time, man, especially Knott's, because Knott's was easier to get into and less expensive, too. But I was a little closer to Knott's, but I was close to both, and so we went all the time. My father worked in the space program. He worked for Rockwell International.
Ooh.
And they used to rent out Disneyland around Christmas time when they would do that. And the park was only open until like 6 p.m. in the evening during the winter time, or at least during December. And they would rent the park out to corporations, and Rockwell International was one of the ones that would do it. And so every year we go there for that, and we go there for other times. Knott's Berry Farm, we go there for birthdays sometimes. It was a blast, and I guess probably when you're a kid you don't realize how good you've got it because you've got that in your backyard. But it was pretty awesome.
What kinds of things were you interested in as a kid, other than the fact that Knott's Berry Farm and Disneyland, literally, like you say, in your backyard? Man, how cool was that?
Oh, it was awesome. It was absolutely awesome. What was I was kind of a weird kid. I mean, one of the things that I was doing when I'm sure that's a big shock to you, BZ. But
like me, yeah.
Yeah, But, I can remember watching the Watergate hearings. I was a big news hound when I was a kid. I'd read the newspaper front to back every day. I would read Time magazine and Newsweek back when they were, worth reading. And I would read them actually back to front for whatever. I was weird. I used to eat hamburgers from the top down too. I mean, I was just a weird kid. But I was a news junkie even back then. I was interested in politics even back then, and so I kind of grew up with that. My father was conservative. My mother was conservative. My father and I agreed on 96% of everything, and it was the 4% that we disagreed on that we would get into like red-faced shouting matches with each other over, because young bull, old bull stuff. So in Orange County, it was conservative back then. It was more doctrinaire conservative back then.
That's right. That's right. You were in Orange County. I completely that escaped me. Yep, you're right.
Well, where I was living when I was a kid, I was in Los Angeles County, but it's right on the edge. And so culturally, it was kind of Orange County culturally. When we moved to Cerritos, I was like 7 years old. Excuse me, and it was called Dairy Valley a few years before we moved there, and there were still operating dairies there. There was a couple of horse stables, and there was 4 or 5 operating dairies still in Cerritos, and I used to have to ride my bicycle past the dairies, and believe me, that's something you never forget.
Yeah.
But so it was sort of an ex-urban sort of feel, sort of a suburban, ex-urban sort of feel at first, but it was kind of culturally Orange County back then, and it was kind of sort of, even that area was kind of sort of conservative. But when I was an adult, I moved into Orange County. I mostly just lived in Orange County for the period of time when I was an adult before I moved out to Minnesota.
I was going to ask you how it was that you became a conservative, but you kind of asked me that, or answered that question already by saying that it was basically your surroundings, where you were, your mom, your dad. You were a reader at an early age, and I think reading absolutely is the key. I mean, if you can get kids interested in reading early, and I read everything when I was a kid. So those apparently all factored into making you conservative as you are today.
Yeah, I know people who grew up liberal or progressive and became conservative and had a conversion experience, and I think that's wonderful. To really, those are always great stories. Conversion experiences in politics and in religion, conversion experiences are always great stories, and I love hearing them. But I can't honestly say that I had one of those because I've pretty much always been conservative, and I think it had a lot to do with the fact that I was growing up with my dad, who's conservative. My mother was conservative. They were actually Kennedy voters. When I was born, they were Kennedy voters, but they moved to the right, and Kennedy wasn't really left anyway.
No.
But I think that they moved to the right for cultural reasons. And that's partly what was going on with me too. But the more you read, the more you get grounded in some of the values and the intellectual structure of conservatism, and it very much appealed to me. The subsidiarity of conservatism, the personal responsibility of conservatism, the need to have a fiscal grounding in government and accountability, which is something that you get with conservatives. Well, something you used to get with conservatives.
Right.
But,
yes.
But it's still there. It's just that we're not operating on the principles that we should be operating on. That's frustrating these days. But and I think just being immersed in the news and understanding what was going on, I think that was also a huge part of it. Just being informed, I think, was a huge part of that for me.
So, Ed Morrissey, where did you go to college, and what was that experience like? And unlike me, for example, did you learn anything?
Well, not according to the colleges I went to. I never did graduate. I went to Cal State Fullerton, and
Okay.
I kind of consider that my alma mater. I never graduated from Cal State Fullerton. I was at at one point invited to rethink my options, so to speak.
Invited, air quotes.
I was invited to rethink my options. I was really not participating. I mean, it was clear that I was wasting their time and my money, or my parents' money, actually. And then I went back and went to Orange Coast College, which is a community college, a very good community college in Costa Mesa. And I was only just studying electronics. I just wanted to study electronics, and I got what I wanted out of that. And then I tried to go back and finish my bachelor's degree through the University of Phoenix, which I was very impressed by. The University of Phoenix has really got a very good structure for people who are out in the world and working already. And I would highly recommend them, but I had just gotten married, I had a new family, and there was other things that were going on at the time, and I just did not have the time or the energy to finish my work. So I never did actually finish getting a degree, but I consider Cal State Fullerton as my alma mater.
You grew up in California. Back then it was spelled with a C, not a K. And
True.
Other than the obvious things these days, but you moved east to Minnesota. What motivated that move? Was that you doing it, or was it your family moving?
No, my family was not a big fan of this move. I like to tell people I moved to Minnesota for the weather.
Right, because it's so great. Good point.
And then when they look at me with their jaws hanging open, I say, well, I was badly misinformed. No, I moved out here because there was a job out here. It was a good offer. I had a good offer at the time I was unemployed, and it was a good offer, and it turned out to be a very good job. I really enjoyed working for this company. I worked there for 9.5 years. Previous to Hot Air, that was the longest I'd ever worked for any one company. And they were a great company. I loved working for them. I could have done that the rest of my life, but I got an opportunity to do this professionally, and I took it, and it's been a great move for me. So, but I like it out here. You know, our family's out here now. We've got grandkids out here. So I'm not looking to move away from Minnesota.
You indicated you were always a big reader, Ed Morrissey. Does that mean that you kind of always had an interest in writing as well?
Yes. Yeah, I wanted to be a writer for a very long time. And when I was in Cal State Fullerton, I was trying to take writing courses there, communications courses, trying to learn how to be a writer. And I wanted to write fiction. And I spent a lot of years off and on trying to do that until it became very clear to me that I'm not very good at it. I wrote 3 novels. And I am very, very happy that no one's ever going to get a chance to see them. I submitted them all over the place. They got turned down repeatedly for very good reasons. And I took up blogging so that I could practice writing on a daily basis. That I could hone my skills, and mostly just to get myself into a discipline of writing every day. And then I discovered that that's the writing that I really have a talent for, and so I just kind of threw myself into that instead. And I've been very happy with that. That was 15 years ago.
Okay, you're probably going to find this is kind of weird, but I started my own blog in 2004. We're going to get into blogging in just a moment, but one of the major reasons I wanted to get into blogging, and I know this is a shock, but one of the reasons that I wanted to do that is just like you. I wanted to get into the habit of writing once a day. So I told myself I was going to have a minimum of 1 post a day, just like you, to try to get into the habit of that. So, folks, I'm talking to Ed Morrissey. He writes and transcribes and does everything from hotair.com, has his own radio show. We're going to get into blogging a little bit. I'd like to kind of hit the original Fractured Flickers Wayback Machine belonging to Mr. Peabody and Sherman and take us back to your bio from 2003, which read something remarkably similar to this. Ed Morrissey has blogged at Captain's Quarters since 2003, has a daily radio show at Blog Talk Radio where he serves as political director. Called Captain Ed by his readers, Ed is a father and a grandfather living in the Twin Cities areas of Minnesota. a native California who moved to the North Star State, just like you said, because of the weather, the great weather. He lives with his wife, Marcia, also known as the First Mate, and frequently watches their granddaughter, Kayla, known as Cap Q readers as the Little Admiral. So 2003 and 2004 seem to be important years in the era of blogging. Like I said, I began mine in 2004 and you in 2003. So at what point did the bulb come on in your brain and you said, okay, this is really what I want to do. I really want to start a blog?
Well, it was really just in September of 2003. I had been reading blogs for a while. I was very impressed with their ability to provide feedback loops for media outlets. And being a frustrated letter to the editor-writer myself, and occasionally a unpaid op-ed contributor to the Star Tribune, because at the time, and they may still do this, they would take submissions from readers, like essay-length submissions, and they would print them in the Sunday paper if they were readable. Basically, if you could write and you had a point and you got to it, they would sometimes print those. And so I had a few of those printed up, and that was actually pretty nice. And Strib is hard lefty paper, but they were pretty good about doing that. But that's frustrating because you're still relying on somebody else to publish, and so I was reading blogs probably from 2000, probably after 9/11. That's probably when I started reading the blogs, because I started reading the blogs that were around New York City to find out what was going on, what people were seeing. And then I just sort of expanded out. Instapundit was a big hub for that, obviously.
Right. He
was the guy.
Yes.
And still is, in my opinion, still is the guy. So, after... It was almost 2 years later, right, when I started thinking about writing my own blog. I actually started a blog on, I think it was blogger.com. I opened up a blog and I started it and I didn't like it, so I shut it down. About a week later, I tried again on Typepad, and that's the one that stuck. That's the one that I kept up with, and finally decided what it was that I wanted to do with it. Spent about a month trying to figure out who I wanted to be. The first month, I just moved my archives over to a new site because the old site was screwed up. The CSS on it is referencing a site called blogrolling.com, which is being redirected to a domain sale page, and so it just yanks you right off of my site. So I had to get into this. I had to figure out how to even get into the old system and export all the posts. And I reloaded them on a new WordPress site. So it's up and running at the captainsquartersblog.com domain. And so it was, like I used to do every once in a while. I went back and looked at the first month or so of my posts, and it's very clear that in the beginning I was thinking that I was Instapundit. And it took me about 2 weeks to realize that there was already an Instapundit, and the world really didn't need two of them. And so I like to write. I like to write at length, and so I discovered that that's really what my niche was. And research and getting multiple points of view from the media on a topic, that was sort of my niche, rather than just aggregating. And so that's what I did. And after about a month, I kind of settled into the style that I still use to this day.
So it was wanting to write. It was wanting to consistently write. It was having a voice and needing to express it. And then it was also conservatism in politics that you threw in as well.
Well, I think conservatism in politics was really one of my primary aims. I mean, this was,
okay.
This was, how do I tell this story? I used to debate politics with friends, and you used to be able to do that, and I used to be able to do that with my friends. And then I discovered I was eating by myself an awful lot. And I thought, maybe this is not a good strategy. And so I was thinking, and part of that is that when you're debating somebody, if you're not used to it, if you're debating people face-to-face, one-on-one, it gets emotional. And people get emotional. And, sometimes it's not you getting emotional. It's the other person. You don't know how to handle it. And so either back off or you get emotional in return, and things get tense. This is like me arguing with my dad. And so I decided maybe what I want to do is just blog. And when people want to talk to me about it, just say, go read my blog. I wrote about it the other day. And not have these debates with friends, because it's just got to be, the stakes got to be so personal.
Yeah.
In political debates. And that was also part of the reason why, when you're blogging, it's easier to be analytical and to put things in analytical and logical and fact-based terms, because you have the time to write it out, you have the time to look it up, you have the time to make sure that you're correct, that your assumptions are correct, and before you make the argument. And so that's always been sort of my style. And people sometimes, I have friends who are very liberal. I have very dear friends who are very liberal. I have family members who are liberal. And I just tend not to get into debates with them because I just don't want to make that be the interaction that we have. So blogging was the outlet for that. So it always focused on politics. There's some culture, there's some sports, a little bit of there was more personal stuff in the Captain's Quarters blog, because it was a personal blog. Hot Air is a professional blog. It's a professional platform, so I don't do a lot of personal stuff. I do a little bit from time to time, but I don't do a lot of it because it's just a different kind of platform.
Ed Morrissey, did you have any kind of an inkling, really, the blockbuster that your first blog, Captain's Quarters, would become, and how, in my mind, it really kind of shed light on the path for conservative bloggers in general, myself included. The reason I said that at the beginning of the show is I think we owe you and people like you homage for blazing various trails. I think it's very important.
Well, I certainly appreciate that. Thank you so much for saying that. I really do appreciate that. There were people who came before me, too, and, people like Powerline who were very super gracious to me in helping me out, Hugh Hewitt in helping me out. I had mentors, I had allies, and I understood how to network and how to build networks. That was something that I kind of brought into my blogging experience because I understood how to approach that. I think it might just be that, I was there before a lot of other people got there. So it's easy to be a trailblazer when you're just early, right? But I always think when people say, "Well, you were one of the originals," and I always think to myself, "Well, actually, I didn't see myself like that at the time. In fact, when I got into it, I was wondering if there was going to be any room for new voices because the blogosphere seemed to be at the time, just because we didn't understand what the scope would eventually be." I was thinking, well, there's already a lot of voices out there, and I'm not necessarily sure that mine's going to break through. Like I said, I was fortunate to have good friends. I was fortunate to have allies and mentors who helped me break through and to kind of grasp how a decentralized distributed network would run, decentralized distributed information network would run. Especially one that's as informal as the blogosphere. And so that plus just trying to write the best I could in the context that we operate in, which is a very quick, it's very rapid fire. What we do is very rapid fire. We don't, I write a column for the week, and I'll get a topic on, say, Monday afternoon. I'll thrash it out till about Tuesday and, finish writing it. It'll get posted on Wednesday or Thursday. And that's great for columns. There's nothing wrong with that because columns you're talking about sort of like big picture type of things. You're not talking about moment-to-moment things. Blogging is moment-to-moment. So you got to be able to write. You got to be able to read fast. You got to be able to write fast. You got to be able to put together thoughts fast. You really have to be organized for that. And I think that there were two things that I had going for me that allowed me to do that well. One is I'm a very fast reader, and the other one is that I actually can type pretty fast. I can type actually pretty quickly and fairly accurately, even though I never really took any formal typing classes. I use my own screwed up system for that, but it's the one I've been using for like 30 years, so I'm not gonna change it now. But
I was incredibly lucky that I learned typing in. She's not here anymore, in Mrs. Lefko's class in Howe Avenue Junior High, but I learned typing in 7th grade, and I am so glad that I did. Folks, we're talking to Ed Morrissey at hotair.com. We're going to take a break. You're listening to BZ, that's me, and Ed Morrissey, that's him, at shrmedia.com. You can listen there and jump into the chat room. We'll be right back, folks, after this. Pretty please come back.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
For 50 years, I've seen the American people blinded by corrupt politicians, a lapdog media, and deceptive Islam. The one thing the elites fear is one man with a cane. I'm Dave Milner. Join me through Spreaker, iTunes, and SoundCloud, through SHR Media and the Western Free Radio Network, for half a century of experienced perspective on political and social issues, weekly on The Unpleasant Blind Guy. And catch me on Jeff Mitchell's EDL Radio on blogtalkradio.com. There's
no surrender, ever.
Because truth is not always pleasant.
It's your business diva here, Melanie Collette. I am inviting you to a front row seat as I discuss some of the most intriguing details of wealth and finance with today's movers and shakers in the world of business. Listen in and discover financial truths on a global, domestic, and household scale. Uncover topics that will impact your wallet today and in the future. Money Talk with Melanie airs Monday through Friday, 5 p.m. East, 2 p.m. West, right here on SHR Media and High Plains Pundit Talk Radio. You can't afford to miss it.
From a public locker inside a dilapidated Long Island rail station comes a show designed to piss off liberals using truth, facts, and ridicule. The Lid Radio Show, featuring the conservative voice from the People's Republic of New York, the Lid himself, Jeff Dunitz. Tune in every Wednesday at 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific on the SHR Media Network. Go to shrmedia.com. At Lid Radio, we fight for the truth, justice, and a good kosher T-bone. If you don't listen, Hillary Clinton might sneak into your bedroom in her housecoat late at night and blame you for her election loss. It's the Lid Radio Show with Jeff Dunitz.
Hey girls, Carry Girl Gear is here. More and more women every day are concealed carrying, participating in competitive shooting, and getting firearms training. It's not a boys' club anymore, and we don't have to shop in their stores anymore either. Finally, a cool and unique clothing line just for women. Dope tees and hats for the patriotic concealed carry and 2A girl. So what are you waiting for? Go check out carrygirlgear.com today.
Broadcasting behind enemy lines in occupied California, a mere 2 miles from the state capital, the bloviating Zeppelin's Berserk Bobcat Saloon radio show can be heard every Tuesday and Thursday night at 8 p.m. Pacific and 11 p.m. Eastern, only on the SHR Media Network. Go to shrmedia.com to listen. You can also watch on the SHR Media Facebook page and the SHR Media YouTube channel. No goldfish were abused in the making of this ad.
New show on the SHR Media Network, Sackheads Against Tyranny. On shrmedia.com. Go there quick like a bunny, 11 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Pacific, every Wednesday. Live and direct on the SHR Media Network. shrmedia.com. Be there.
Hey, this is Michael Wright.
And I'm Shannon Wright.
Join us for The Right Way with Shannon and Mike, Monday through Thursday from 7 to 9 a.m. right here on SHR Media.
Why are they joining us?
For fun things like sports, politics.
Oh, maybe some news and entertainment?
And all kinds of other things.
Money and recipes and events, all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, so join us Monday through Thursday, 7 to 9 a.m. here on SHRmedia.com.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, welcome to the Bloviating Zeppelin's Berserk Bobcat Saloon radio show. It is I, the Bloviating Zeppelin, one each. And I'm here tonight with the stupendous Ed Morrissey from hotair.com, formerly of Captain's Quarters. We'll get a little bit more into that. I'm going to be, by the way, Mike, yes, we are going to be taking calls. If you look at the, okay, I'll put the number in chat again. But for those of you who don't happen to be in chat, if you're just listening on Spreaker, audio only, and you're interested in calling in, the number is 209-284-3210. 209-284-3210. That number on Zephron is 209-284-3210. If you're calling from Guatemala, it's 209-284-3210. And it's true. So, Ed Morrissey, thank you very much for being here tonight. I greatly appreciate it. So, folks, if you want to call in, give him a call. I'm going to ask him a question involving a topic where I bet you, Ed Morrissey, haven't thought about this in quite some time, but if I'm not mistaken, it kind of helped you along the way. Can you tell us about Canada's ad scam, what it was, and how your blog was involved? And I think it was involved directly, was it not, sir?
It was, actually. This was in 2005, and ad scam was this really interesting Canadian government scandal, and, it was a very Canadian scandal. It was very friendly, It didn't involve violence. It didn't involve, deep state type stuff. Well, kind of, I guess. But so what it was this, is that if you know anything about Canada, you know that Quebec is forever threatening to leave.
Yeah,
right?
Yes.
They're forever threatening to leave. And so the Liberal government, and this is the name of the party is Liberal, the Liberals. Trudeau's a Liberal, for instance. The Liberal government set up this ad program where they were going to sweet talk the Quebecers, right? They were going to sponsor cultural events. We're not talking about large amounts of dollars for that type of stuff, right? They were going to set up some tents at these cultural events like county fairs and that sort of thing, and talk about how great the union is, and how everybody loves Quebec and they want Quebec to be part of the union. Just try to make them feel good about being Canadian, which is an uphill battle with Quebecers. Anyway, they also had larger contracts for ad campaigns and that sort of thing. And what was going on was that the government was directing all these dollars to politically connected firms and politically connected people, and they were getting kickbacks. The party was getting kickbacks on this. And I'm oversimplifying this because it was actually quite complicated. But basically it was this setup where the Liberal Party was basically using government funds to operate its political operations, to fund its political operations. It was very corrupt. And Canada kind of tumbled onto this. They were in the middle of a trial in this thing, and they were they were going to hold hearings. It wasn't a trial, it was something of, I'm trying to think of what the best, it's kind of like a grand jury type of situation, only it was rather than being run by a prosecutor, it was being run by a judge. And they were going to be talking to three of the key people that were involved in this, and they were allowing people to sit in the room to hear this testimony, but the media was not allowed to report on it. And so the only people who were going to be able to hear this, to hear what was actually going on in this inquiry, were some of the people who were involved in this corruption, and the rest of the country wasn't going to be able to find out until months and months later when they finally came up with a report, because the judge put this, basically it's a gag order is what it was. They called it something else, forget exactly what they called it, but it was a gag order. And it was the people in Canada, the media outlets in Canada were very frustrated by this, there was nothing they could do, though, because that's legal in Canada.
Yes, it is. Yep.
And so what happened was that somebody who was sitting in that room got in contact with me. He was going to be sitting in the room. And this is the first time I've even said the gender of the person in 13 years or 14 years. And that was actually a slip. But
oops.
He contacted me and said, I'm going to be sitting in the room, and I can give you a readout of everything that's being said and what it means. Are you interested in publishing this? Because I had just got done doing a whole bunch of things regarding freedom of speech and the freedom of the media to report. And so, and I was not located in Canada. And so it was, and I didn't have an operating office in Canada. You know, NBC, CBS, ABC, you know, American media outlets, they have offices in Canada and could have gotten them in a lot of trouble if they'd done that. So I took a risk because I really didn't know who this person was. I mean, I knew who he was. I mean, I knew the identity. I knew where he worked, but you know, I wasn't sure if I was going to be getting an accurate rendition because obviously everybody's got their perspective on these things, and I know that better than anybody else, you know, or at least I know it as well as anybody else. But I agreed to do it, and I posted up the first day's testimony, and then I really just held my breath because I'm thinking to myself, I am going to get so much hate mail from people who are sitting in the room saying that this is not what happened, right? I mean, that was my big fear, that this isn't what happened. In which case I would have said, okay, look, you know, I'm not going to do it again, right? I'll take it down. I'm not going to do it again. Well, this happened over a weekend. I started posting this stuff over a weekend when he's feeding this stuff to me a little at a time. And at first, I start seeing that I'm getting a little bit more traffic from Canada, a little bit more traffic from Canada, a little bit more traffic from Canada. Then all of a sudden, it goes off the scale. In fact, we were having trouble keeping the blog operating. Thank God for the people at Hosting Matters. They're people who still do, to this day, they host the Captain's Quarters site. They're fantastic. And they were trying to throw more resources. They actually gave me my own server, even though I wasn't paying for it, in order to keep up with the traffic, because they're very big fans of the blogosphere. Right? At Hosting Matters, they're really into the blogosphere, and they were really excited by this. They wanted to see if they could keep up with this stuff. And what had happened was that Canadian television had gone on the air, reporters were going on the air saying, there's an American blogger who is getting incredibly accurate readouts of the testimony at the Gomery hearings, and we don't know how he's getting it, and we can't tell you who he is because we're not allowed to report on it. But if you know, basically they were wink, wink, nudge, nudge. I suppose you could Google it and see if it's like. And so, I mean, all this traffic is coming to me from Google.ca, right? Everybody is coming to me from Google.ca, and I am just buried in this stuff. And Judge Gomery was really irate about this.
Oh, well.
But I will tell you this, to their credit, the people in the Canadian media who reached out to me said, we are so jealous of you, because we wanted to do this, and we are literally not able to do it. And it's great that you're doing it, but we really wish a Canadian would have been able to do this. And I told them the same thing. I said, yeah, absolutely. I wish a Canadian would be able to do it, too, because it shouldn't have been gagged. Right. If people from the government, they had lines that were connected to government offices so that they could listen to the testimony in these government offices, the government offices that were being controlled by the Liberal Party, mind you. But they weren't allowing Canadian media to report on this stuff. And there weren't any American media out there because, unfortunately for us, we really don't pay a whole lot of attention to our Canadian neighbors. They're good folks, but we don't pay a lot of attention to them, which is a shame. So for a couple of days, right, I'm posting this stuff up. And then finally Gomery just said, look, we're just going to open this because it ain't working. You know, the gag order ain't working. And so at that point, my part of the story was basically over. But I was getting a lot of interviews. I lost my voice in the middle of this thing. And so I'm talking like, you know, Don Corleone on Canadian television. Oh, well, you know, blah, blah, blah.
Leave the gun, take the cannoli.
Yeah, exactly. Leave the plug. Leave the plug. Take the Gomery. It was a blast. It was an absolute blast, but I got to tell you, I don't think I've ever felt more relief than when I found out that it was accurate, right? because that was my big, huge worry. Because I'm concerned that I don't want to spread misinformation, right? I mean I was really in a vulnerable position, but my instinct said that this is the way to go, and it just ended up paying off. The end result of this was that the Canadian electorate had been more or less, I don't want to say that they didn't care about the scandal, but they weren't really paying a lot of attention. They weren't really engaged with the scandal. But the fact that there was a gag order and that an American blogger was basically scooping the entire Canadian media was fascinating to Canadians, and they got super engaged in this.
That was the hook
at that point.
Right there. That was the hook.
That was the hook, and so it became a much bigger scandal as a result, and the Liberals paid the price at the voting booth. It was just a few months later that they had to have an election, and the Conservatives won. And there were people who were saying Ed Morrissey brought down the Liberal government. I always say the Canadian people took down the Liberal government because the Liberal government deserved it, and the Canadian people are the ones that did the work. I just happened to be at the right place at the right time and made sure they were informed of it. And I was very happy to do that. And although I was a little nervous about traveling to Canada until the government changed, I was thinking to myself, that technically I broke the law, and if they're really sore at me, they could probably still arrest me for it. But I don't worry about that anymore. I'm sure it's safe for me to travel again. I've been to Canada a few times since then. I haven't had a problem.
Folks, we're talking to Ed Morrissey of HotAir.com. He has his own radio show. And Ed is being pretty humble, because what Ed didn't tell you is that during that amount of time, he was getting about 500,000 hits a day. That's why the server was having a bit of a problem. We got a caller, Mike. Are you there? Are you still there, hanging in there, Mike?
I am here, BZ.
All right, you got a question for Ed Morrissey of HotAir.com.
Yes, I do. And look, as far as we trying to get rid of the squad and stuff, it's much easier to get rid of 3 or 4 of them than Omar, because think about it. You look at that district she's in, she's pretty safe, I would think, but even if they did happen to get rid of her, who's to say we wouldn't get anybody much worse than her, because the district is, she's a Somali, most of that is Somali, and most of those people probably believe the same way she does, and have the same beliefs that she does. Correct?
Well, okay. Can you phrase that into a question for Ed?
No, I got the question.
Okay.
I understand what Mike's saying.
Alrighty.
Minnesota 5 is nutso. Okay, it just is. It's so far left. It may even be wrapping back around to the fringe right in some ways. And Ilhan Omar is even crazier than I think the district is in some ways. And she's running into a whole lot of problems. Here's why I think that Ilhan Omar's days are probably numbered in Minnesota 5. 2 reasons. One is that that brand of progressivism doesn't really represent the Somali community as much as you think it would. And I think that they're not necessarily happy with the way that she's talking about Jews, because the Jews in Minnesota 5 have been the Somalis' allies in those communities, and so there's already some community leaders who have spoken up about this, saying that they're angry with Omar. I'm talking about Somali community leaders who are speaking up and saying they're very angry with Omar about the way she's talking about Jews and the way she's talking about Israel. And the other part is that there is actually a substantial Jewish population in Minnesota 5 too. There's a substantial Somali population in Minneapolis. There's a lot of refugees that were resettled in Minneapolis. They're fine people, for the most part. They're like any other immigrant group. They're struggling to figure out how to fit in. and their kids are usually more of a problem than they are, and that's also been the case. And unfortunately, because of the circumstances going on in Somalia, being a bigger problem is really a substantially bigger problem. There was a couple dozen that disappeared, and the FBI suspects that they were convinced to go back to Somalia and act as suicide bombers. So they're still trying to figure out what happened to their sons, which is it's a really sad situation. But here's the thing about Minnesota 5. It will produce another progressive. I mean, there are a couple of Republicans, I think, now that are saying that they're going to run against Ilhan Omar in 2020. It's like, yeah, well, good luck. Maybe you'll get 10% of the vote. I mean, it's that far gone, right? In order for Omar to be shown the door, you're going to have another Democrat run against her in a primary. I think that's actually a pretty good possibility, maybe even a probability, because I think the people in Minnesota 5 are probably very tired of the negative publicity that they're getting from Ilhan Omar, and now there's more personal scandal with her marriage breaking up and breaking up the marriage of her political advisor, and there's allegations in the divorces about that. There's questions as to whether or not that was basically led her to misappropriate campaign funds in order to give this guy money, personally. That's another thing that's going to be hanging over her head. I would say I would give it a even odds that you're going to get another Democrat challenging her in a primary, and would probably knock her off pretty easily if that's the case.
Mike, do you have another question, Mike?
Now, well, here's how I came across Ed originally, and it wasn't through his blog. It was more through his where he was doing his radio show before he was doing his on Facebook. I actually found you through somebody else, and got into on that other site, watching your show on the other site, and then one day you mentioned your captain's quarters and your other blog and stuff, and I found those things, and there you go, and then I heard about you being on the radio way back when in Minnesota at the time with another couple of guys starting the Northern Alliance and stuff, and well, there we go, and I basically found you through that,
Hey, that's great, Mike, and I really appreciate it. By the way, the Northern Alliance is still doing the radio show. I mean, I left because I had other things going on, but Mitch Berg is still doing it every Saturday, 1 to 3 Central Time on AM 1280 The Patriot. So I got to give a plug to my former radio partner. He's great. Loved working with Mitch, and we drop in every once in a great while and invade his studio. So
right, and look, I'm great friends with another one of your guys, the Cranky T-Rex, Oh,
yeah, he's great. He's done a lot of, he's really helped me out a lot, and not just on air. He's done a lot of stuff for me off air, too, to fix some infrastructure problems I had with my show.
Yes.
Yeah, that tends to, we know about BZ being a technical Luddite, and that's BZ.
Yeah.
That's BZ for you. We know
that's
BZ
true.
for that long.
It's very obvious. Okay, great. Thanks for bringing up all my shortcomings. Mike, appreciate it. Mike, see ya. Goodbye. No, Mike, seriously, I appreciate the call. Ed Morrissey, at the top of your blog, when you originally wrote Captain's Quarters, and folks, if you want to find he archived, he buffed this new blog off to a pearly shine, and it sparkles, I got to tell you. Go to Captain's Quarters blog, all one word, captainsquartersblog.com. But I always wondered, Ed Morrissey, what did this mean at the top of your blog? Thus every blogger in his kind is bit by him who comes behind.
That is part of a short poem. It's a takeoff, I should say, of the end of a short poem by Jonathan Swift, and this is it's a funny little poem that he wrote, and it's always stuck with me. and I think I have it memorized. It says, "Thus naturalists observe a flea, hath other fleas which on him prey, and these have smaller still to bite him, and so proceed ad infinitum. Thus every poet in his kind is bit by him who comes behind." It's, sort of a humorous swipe at, critic poets or poet critics, I guess, that Jonathan Swift may have been dealing with in the late, 18th century, I guess. I've always loved that poem. And when I was first getting involved in blogging, I thought, man, rather than poet, those last two lines, "thus every poet in his kind is bit by him who comes behind," that really also applies to bloggers, because bloggers would write and they would critique other bloggers. They would get in arguments with other bloggers. Sometimes you'd start blog wars, which I think are the most pointless thing ever. But
True.
maybe Twitter wars have eclipsed it as the most pointless thing ever. But I thought, man, that's a great description of blogging. And so right from the very first day I started that blog, that was the tagline for the blog. And I think it's my first post. If you can dial all the way back to my first post, I put it in my first post, the whole Jonathan Swift poem, to explain why it was there. And honestly, I hadn't thought about it in a while until I went back to re-archive the old blog, and I was looking for the artwork to put at the top, and I found it. And the artwork has that. It was integrated into the artwork for the blog. And I thought, man, I missed that so much. I missed that so much because that, to me, just really spoke, especially in the early days, about blogging. And the healthy thing about blogging, it started debates, it started discussions, and that was what was healthy about it. It's what I enjoyed so much about it.
I only have one poem that I remembered from Bennett Cerf, and it goes like this: a flea and a flaw. Oh, God. All right, never mind. Moving right along. We have another call. Can you take another call? Ed Morrissey. All right. Caller, I don't know who you are, but you are on. What do you have to say for Ed Morrissey?
Hi, this is Simone.
Oh, Simone, how you doing? Good to hear you.
Hi, Simone.
Hi, Ed. Hey, first off, I wanted to thank you for blogging. I know it's a hard thing to do and to be at it every day, all the time. I did have some questions about how do we take care of Kamala Harris, because it looks like she might be a front runner there for the Democrats, and she totally screwed California, which is where I'm from. And lately she's been doing even worse things. So what can we do about her?
What part of California are you from, Simone?
Unfortunately, Sacramento.
Oh, okay. Sacramento. All right.
She's in my neck of the woods.
She was the state attorney general here in Sacramento.
Yes, she was. Yep.
And now she's all anti-cop.
Yeah, well, yeah. The thing about Kamala Harris, I actually just got done writing a column. My column today for the week is about how Kamala Harris can kind of recover. She's pretty much taking care of herself right now. She's shooting herself in the foot. She's trying to be all things to all people, and it's a really bad look for her. She's all over the place. And I don't think she did herself any favors in that climate change thing. The only saving grace of that is that it was 7 hours long and nobody was paying attention.
That's true.
She's going to have to decide who she is before the next debate, though. That's really what the key is. I don't think that she's going to be a front runner unless she can figure out how to do that. Right now, it's really looking between the 370-year-olds, Biden, Sanders, and Warren. And Harris is dropping off. She's fallen way behind. And she should really be the front runner. I mean, really, honestly, she fills all the boxes for Democrats. She fills the identity boxes. She fills the she fills the youth box.
Yeah, until she opened her mouth.
Right, exactly. That's her problem. She's not a very good candidate. She's not a good campaigner, and she doesn't know how to take a punch. She doesn't know how to deliver.
Biden's going to get the sympathy vote, really? I mean,
nah.
Because
she's going to have to. She's going to have to. She has to straighten things out before she's going to be able to come back. And there's still room to do it. That's sort of the point of my column. But time is running out. She's got to do it by this next debate, or she's going to be toast.
Oh, no, but I was talking about Biden. You think Biden's going to get the sympathy vote? Is that why he's a front runner?
Yeah, I think so. Also, he's just familiar. And you know,
well,
don't
that's his
forget that
problem.
Biden,
He's too familiar. He puts his hands on everybody.
Wow.
Wow.
I actually didn't mean it that way, but
Wow.
yes, you're correct about that. But he's the guy that he's one of the last of the old time Democrats, one of the last of the guys who can actually speak to the working class, the old coalition of Democrats. Everybody else is so progressive that they're really only appealing to the urban cores. Biden's the last guy who can reach outside of that. So I think that's where his numbers coming from, and also his numbers are coming from the African American voters inside the Democratic coalition. They like Biden because Biden was Obama's partner. And I don't think that they like Sanders, and I don't think they like Warren.
Well, I'll get off the phone so someone else can chat you up. Ed, thank you so much for the great work you do. I admire bloggers. I know BZ has a blog too. I don't think I could commit myself to writing something every day because I just can't do it. So God bless the both of you, and thank you, Ed, for coming on so we could chat with you.
Oh, thanks, Simone. Really great talking with you. Thanks for the call.
Thank you, Simone. That was very kind. That was very nice. Okay, now I need to emphasize this very importantly. It's 9:01 on the left coast, which means it's 11:01 where Ed is. And I have to thank him very much for staying up so late because most of the people that I speak to are in the Midwest or the far East Coast. And we budgeted an hour, and I don't want to go over that. So I have to tell you, Ed Morrissey, I want to sincerely thank you for your time tonight because you stayed up so late. I didn't get but to a fraction of my questions and issues. So that being said, would you consider returning to the show in the future?
Absolutely. We got to do this again. I had a blast. Thanks so much for having me on. It's worth staying up past my bedtime. I'm an old man, you know. My bedtime was like 4 hours ago. I do that. What's that thing in South Park with the country kitchen buffet thing at 4 o'clock in the afternoon? That's when I eat dinner, and I'm in bed before the sun goes down. But for you, I stay up, and I had a blast. And honestly, seriously, I'd love to do it again.
I thank you very, very much. And we're over the break, but that's okay. It's my damn show, so I can do anything I want. I got to ask you one final question because you make reference to it. And I'm not trying to pigeonhole you and I'm not trying to pin you down or anything, but in your social media, you've been making reference to something called goingredbook.com. Is this something you can talk about yet?
Oh, yeah. It came out 3 years ago.
Oh, okay. All right. But I went to that site and there's nothing there.
It's my one. Yeah, I know. I gotta change that. So I gotta create a new site for it. But it's Going Red. It was my book. It came out in 2016, early 2016.
All right.
And it's if you look at the marketing materials and you look at the subtitle and stuff like that, it's calculated about the 2016 election. But I think that the book actually holds up in a lot of different ways for all election cycles. So I literally dozens of people have been completely bowled over by this book. Dozens of people, I tell you.
That's right. People. More dozens than you ever anticipated, damn it.
I'm telling you. I'm surprised anybody bought it. But I really worked hard in it. I'm very proud of the book. And if you're interested to know what it is that people told me when I went to 7 different swing counties in 2015 to find out, how they're going to make their decisions about elections, then I would encourage you to read Going Red.
Well, Ed Morrissey of hotair.com. Thank you again for appearing on the show. Thank you for your time. Have a great sleep, and God bless and take care, sir. And I'm with you. I would love to do this again.
Me too, BZ, and I'd be happy to do it. So we'll figure out another time to do it. Thank you so much. God bless you. God bless your audience, and keep up the good work, man.
Thank you ever so kindly. Take care, sir.
Take care.
That was Ed Morrissey of hotair.com. It was an honor and a privilege to have him here. When I get back, I'm going to reveal some things that were actually kind of revealed to me last night about criminology, and that made me remember, you know what? That's a topic in an article that I wanted to do about 6 months ago, and I never got around to it. So let's hit that topic tonight in the second hour. And again, you can call in 209-284-3210 because it has criminology, has a direct effect on what's happening today in law enforcement. Folks, this is the Bloviating Zeppelin's Berserk Bobcat Saloon radio show, live and direct from the SHR Media studios. Go to shrmedia.com to listen and also get into the chat room. We'll be right back after this.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
Hey, this is Michael Wright.
And I'm Shannon Wright.
Join us for The Right Way with Shannon and Mike, Monday through Thursday from 7 to 9 a.m. right here on SHR Media.
Why are they joining us?
For fun things like sports, politics.
Oh, maybe some news and entertainment?
And all kinds of other things.
Money and recipes and events, all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, so join us Monday through Thursday, 7 to 9 a.m. here on shrmedia.com.
From a public locker inside a dilapidated Long Island rail station comes a show designed to piss off liberals using truth, facts, and ridicule. The Lid Radio Show, featuring the conservative voice from the People's Republic of New York, the Lid himself, Jeff Dunitz. Tune in every Wednesday at 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific on the SHR Media Network. Go to shrmedia.com. At Lid Radio, we fight for the truth, justice, and a good kosher T-bone. If you don't listen, Hillary Clinton might sneak into your bedroom in her housecoat late at night and blame you for her election loss. It's the Lid Radio Show with Jeff Dunitz.
Hey girls, Carry Girl Gear is here. More and more women every day are concealed carrying, participating in competitive shooting, and getting firearms training. It's not a boys' club anymore, and we don't have to shop in their stores anymore either. Finally, a cool and unique clothing line just for women. Dope tees and hats for the patriotic concealed carry and 2A girl. So what are you waiting for? Go check out carrygirlgear.com today.
It's your business diva here, Melanie Collette. I am inviting you to a front row seat as I discuss some of the most intriguing details of wealth and finance with today's movers and shakers in the world of business. Listen in and discover financial truths on a global, domestic, and household scale. Uncover topics that will impact your wallet today and in the future. Money Talk with Melanie airs Monday through Friday, 5 p.m. East, 2 p.m. West, right here on SHR Media and High Plains Pundit Talk Radio. You can't afford to miss it.
The new show on the SHR Media Network, Sackheads Against Tyranny. On shrmedia.com. Go there quick like a bunny, 11 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Pacific every Wednesday. Live and direct on the SHR Media Network. shrmedia.com. Be there.
For 50 years, I've seen the American people blinded by corrupt politicians, a lapdog media, and deceptive Islam. The one thing the elites fear is one man with a cane. I'm Dave Milner. Join me through Spreaker, iTunes, and SoundCloud, through SHR Media and the Western Free Radio Network, for half a century of experienced perspective on political and social issues, weekly on The Unpleasant Blind Guy. And catch me on Jeff Mitchell's EDL Radio on blogtalkradio.com. There's
no surrender, ever.
Because truth is not always pleasant.
Broadcasting behind enemy lines in occupied California, a mere 2 miles from the state capital, the bloviating Zeppelin's Berserk Bobcat Saloon radio show can be heard every Tuesday and Thursday night at 8 p.m. Pacific and 11 p.m. Eastern. Only on the SHR Media Network. Go to shrmedia.com to listen. You can also watch on the SHR Media Facebook page and the SHR Media YouTube channel. No goldfish were abused in the making of this ad. Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, we're back for the second hour. I was sufficiently privileged and honored to have had Ed Morrissey here for the first time. You know, there are folks that I would almost like to make a monthly gig out of having them on the show for, 15 minutes, half hour, whatever I can find. And Ed Morrissey is one of them. There are a couple of other folks. Actually, Jack is in chat. I wouldn't mind talking to Jack at least once a month to get his input on stuff. So thanks to everybody in chat. There were a bunch of people here, including Ed. And again, Ed, thanks for staying up so late. Because 9, 10, 11, it's 11:11 right now, and I'm sure that he is going back to Betty by. My luck, he probably has to be up at 5 o'clock in the morning, and he'll get, 75 seconds of sleep, so my apologies, Ed. But it was a great interview, just like anybody in radio knows. This should be no shock. Here's the interview. I had 11 pages of questions for Ed. And because you know how I roll, I'll just throw this out there. How many pages do you think I got to out of 11 pages? And it's not like 10-point type. It was double-spaced, 14-point type. I got to 3 pages. That's about it. So I had a ton more questions for Ed. Thank him indeed for being here. Last night, in the Sackheads Against Tyranny, the Shad Show, might have been Whiskey Dale, who brought up an article from Walter Williams, and he put it up in chat, and that reminded me, oh, son of a gun, that's an article, he's making reference to an article that I wanted to get to for a long time, and I think that article has been out, the one that I really wanted to reference, has been out for at least a year now, 2018, maybe 2017, 2018. This article in reference to that came out by Walter Williams yesterday. So I want to make reference to Walter Williams' article, and then I want to go to the specific article that he's talking about. And it happens to do with criminologists. And you may ask yourself, criminologists, okay, what are they? What do they do? They're like academic criminologists. They allegedly look at the causes of crime, the background of crime. Ologist meaning the study of crime, criminologists. But this specifically is a point worth revisiting considering the state of law enforcement today, the state of police today, the state of crime today, and the major leftist theories that are motivating and pushing all this crap right now. And it is crap. First, let me make reference to, because once I get through with these two articles, I'm going to illustrate, as I am normally wont to do, with instance after instance after instance about how this that I'm going to relate to you has a real world consequence that leftists, I don't know, I can't conclude anything other than they want these things to happen. They're amused or predicated by pushing these things to happen. I can't understand. Okay, this is me at a semi-loss for words. I can never understand why leftists fail markedly, brain-glazingly, to make the connection between crime and liberal policies. I don't get that, but I'm going to attempt to show you the clear linkage tonight. Now, this article is, the first one is by Walter Williams. Now, if you don't know who Walter Williams is, get on your favorite search engine and look up Walter E. Williams. This is one of the smartest dudes writing today. He wrote yesterday for dailysignal.com, and the headline is 3 words, incredibly succinct, and that is, criminologists mislead us. I would have thrown in parenthesis purposely. His subtitle is Liberal Criminologists Outnumber Their Conservative Counterparts by a Ratio of, what would you guess? Liberal criminologists outnumber their conservative counterparts by a ratio of what? Throw a number out there. Oh, yeah, that's right. It's 30-1. 30-1. Imagine that. And now I think you're beginning to see the reasonings behind many leftist policies these days. John Paul Wright, professor at University of Cincinnati, and Matthew DeLisi, and that's the article that I'm going to read, professor at Iowa State University, penned a powerful article called What Criminologists Don't Say and Why in City Journal. Okay, there we go. Back in summer of 2017. He's saying they're writing that there is significant bias among criminologists. Would you be shocked? Well, you know, about that time, if I had a producer and I said, would you be shocked? You would have heard, but I don't have a producer, so that is not what you heard. The reason for that bias is that political leanings of academic criminologists are liberal. Liberal criminologists outnumber their conservative counterparts by a ratio of 30-1. Ideology almost perfectly predicts the position of criminologists on issues from, oh wow, gun control, to capital punishment, to harsh, air quotes, harsh sentencing. Liberal criminologists march in step for gun control, oppose punitive prison sentences, and are vehemently against the death penalty. In 2012, the National Academy of Sciences commissioned a study on the growth of incarceration. It showed between 1928 and 1960, crime rates rose slowly each year. After the 1960s, crime rates exploded to unprecedented levels of violence until the 1990s. Prior to 1980, only 40% of the individuals arrested for murder were sentenced to prison, and those that were served an average of 5 years. Stop. This may be anecdotal, but I experienced it directly. When I was in detectives, I was in theft, warrants, sex assaults, child abuse, robbery, and homicide. Some of the largest sentences I ever acquired, as a matter of fact, I held the highest sentence in the state of California for quite some time. I got a particular robber with another detective. We got him sentenced multiple counts, literally dozens of counts of robbery, 211 PC in the California Penal Code. His exposure, which he acquired, is 862 years. That, for a while, was a record in the state of California, of which, with a K now, of which I am incredibly proud. I'll also tell you this. As a child abuse detective, I got higher sentences when people were convicted than almost any venue in which I worked, except for the one in robbery, which brings me to homicide. After working these cases, the sentences that I got in homicide were frequently less than what I got in robbery and child abuse. And that's not just, I don't know anything that I'm talking about. It's not mere speculation. I was there because I was doing the damn job. right there. So, I hate to say enough of Walter Williams, but enough of Walter Williams. Let's get right into the article itself. And again, this is by John Paul Wright and Matt DeLisi from the City Journal in the summer of 2017. Because, again, it gets down to very specific ideas, what criminologists don't say and why. Monopolized by the left, academic research on crime gets almost everything wrong. Well, yeah, you heard that right. The history of academic criminology is one of grand pronouncements that don't often prove out in the real world. In the 1960s and 1970s, for example, criminologists demanded that public policy attack the root causes of crime, such as poverty and racism. Without solving these problems, they argued, we couldn't expect to fight crime effectively. On that thinking, billions of taxpayer dollars poured into ambitious social programs, yet crime went up, not down. In the 1970s and 1980s and well into the 1990s, as crime rates continued to spike, criminologists proceeded to tell us that the police could do little to cut crime, and that locking up the felons, drug dealers, and gang leaders who committed much of the nation's criminal violence, that wouldn't work either. These views were shown to be false, too. But they were held so pervasively across the profession that when political scientist James Q. Wilson called for selective incapacitation of violent repeat offenders, he found himself ostracized by his peers, who resorted to ad hominem attacks on his character and motivations. Wilson's work was ignored by awards committees, and criminological reviews of his books, especially Thinking About Crime and Crime and Human Nature, were almost universally negative. In the real-world policy arena, however, Wilson attained significant influence. The broken windows theory of policing and public order, which Wilson developed with criminologist George Kelling, became a key part of the proactive policing strategies that would be largely responsible for the great crime minimization in the 1990s. Imagine that today. In short, while academic criminology has had much to say about crime, most of it has been wrong. Most of it has been wrong. How can an academic discipline be so wrong-headed? And should we listen to criminologists today when, say, they call for prisons to be emptied, cops to act as glorified playground attendants, and criminal sentences to be dramatically reduced, if not eliminated? You and I both know that those are all advocated. Answers to the first question are readily available and suggest the answers to the second. Academic criminologists are mainly sociologists, trained in statistics and armed with theories. Though most don't study crime or violence directly, they have produced useful studies about offenders and criminal justice system. Although their work, we know, for example, that criminal behavior is strongly intergenerational, that relatively few people account for the majority of all crimes. Stop. That's called the 80-20 rule. 20% of the people cause 80% of the crime. Those numbers fluctuate year to year. And that some offenders desist from crime over time. That's primarily because they get older. But many others simply change the types of crimes they commit. We also have learned that most offenders are generalists. That is, they commit a diverse assortment of crimes, and that steps can be taken to reduce criminal events by making them more difficult to carry out. Wow. What these writers determined was most criminals, it turns out, are lazy. In other ways, though criminologists' lack of direct contact with subject situations and neighborhoods, their propensity to abstraction invites misunderstandings about the reality of crime. Most academics have never met with women who've been raped, or children who've been molested, or seen the carnage wrought by a bullet that passed through a human skull, or spent a lot of time with police on the street. The gulf between numbers on a spreadsheet and the harsh realities of the world sometimes fosters a romanticized view of criminals as victims, making it easier for criminologists to overlook the damage that lawbreakers cause and to advocate for more lenient policies and treatment. Look, you and I both know that is ever so true. Evidence of the liberal tilt in criminology is widespread. Surveys show a 30-to-1 ratio of liberals to conservatives within the field, a spread comparable with that in other social sciences. Imagine that. The largest group of criminologists self-identify as radical or critical. These designations include many leftist intellectual orientations, from radical feminism to Marxism to postmodernism. Stop. These are the people that are telling leftists how to handle crime and criminals. Now you are starting to see the background. Themes of injustice, oppression, disparity, marginalization, economic and social justice, racial discrimination, and state-sanctioned violence dominate criminological teaching and scholarship as represented in books with titles like Search and Destroy, African American Males in the Criminal Justice System, The New Jim Crow, Mass Incarceration in the Age of Color Blindness, and Imprisoning Communities, How Mass Incarceration Makes Disadvantaged Neighborhoods Worse. A quick perusal of presidential awards for distinguished contributions to justice bestowed by the American Society of Criminology, ASC, shows the winners were primarily rewarded for their left-wing advocacy. They include a judge in Massachusetts who advocated abolishing the state's death penalty, an FBI agent who successfully sued the organization for ethnic discrimination, and a former director of juvenile corrections in Massachusetts who closed the state's juvenile reformatories and wrote a book alleging that the system hunted down black men for sport. Yeah, I read that right. The society also honored a person named Zaki Baruti, a radical black activist in St. Louis known for his hatred of police and support for leftist causes. I think you see where I'm going with this article. Recently, the ASC's policy committee sent a mass email to members asking for help in countering a Wall Street Journal editorial written by Heather McDonald, whom I have contacted. I'm waiting to hear something back. I have not, so I'm probably going to rattle her email again. I would love to have Heather McDonald on the show. And her book, War on Cops, because that's true. They wanted to counter a Wall Street Journal editorial written by Heather McDonald, a longtime City Journal contributing editor and a writer known for eviscerating liberal claims about the police and the justice system. McDonald argued that because of increased scrutiny and charges of racism, police had rolled back their efforts to deter crime, at least in minority communities, resulting in rising violence in many cities across the country. She called this the Ferguson effect. Stop. I know for a fact it's true. The stories I could tell. And it was called the Ferguson effect after the town in Missouri where the justified police shooting of Michael Brown, a young black man, in 2014, ignited riots and gave rise to new anti-law enforcement pushes from various advocates, the press, and, of course, Democratic politicians. The existence and extent of the Ferguson effect is an empirical question that can be debated, but it is telling that the ASC had never shown any interest in rebutting the hundreds of editorials that repeated factually baseless claims about police shootings or the racism supposedly embedded in the criminal justice system. Only McDonald's work was singled out, as was Wilson's years earlier. Wonder why that would be. Walter Miller, one of the few mid-20th century criminologists whose work was unapologetically conservative, suggested that ideology can turn plausibility into ironclad certainty, conditional belief into ardent conviction, and reasoned advocate into the implacable zealot. When shared beliefs take hold, as they often do in the academic bubble in which most criminologists live, ideological assumptions about crime and criminals can take the form of the sacred and inviolable dogma of the one true faith, the questioning of which is heresy, and the opposing of which is profoundly evil. Miller's observations have proved prophetic. Led by the work of Jonathan Haidt, H-A-I-D-T, a growing number of scholars now acknowledge that a lack of ideological diversity in the social sciences skews research in favor of leftist claims, imagine that, which become the guiding principles of many fields, challenged only at the risk of, just like climate change, global warming, yeah, that's right, harming one's career. Liberal assumptions go unchecked and tendentious claims of evidence become fact, when countervailing evidence doesn't get published or faces much more rigorous scrutiny than the assertions that it challenges. On that, I'm going to take a timely break. We'll be back after that talking about what criminologists don't say and why and how it affects you and me today, right now.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
For 50 years, I've seen the American people blinded by corrupt politicians, a lapdog media, and deceptive Islam. The one thing the elites fear is one man with a cane. I'm Dave Milner. Join me through Spreaker, iTunes, and SoundCloud, through SHR Media and the Western Free Radio Network, for half a century of experienced perspective on political and social issues, weekly on The Unpleasant Blind Guy. And catch me on Jeff Mitchell's EDL Radio on blogtalkradio.com. There's
no surrender, ever.
Because truth is not always pleasant.
It's your business diva here, Melanie Collette. I am inviting you to a front row seat as I discuss some of the most intriguing details of wealth and finance with today's movers and shakers in the world of business. Listen in and discover financial truths on a global, domestic, and household scale. Uncover topics that will impact your wallet today and in the future. Money Talk with Melanie airs Monday through Friday, 5 p.m. East, 2 p.m. West, right here on SHR Media and High Plains Pundit Talk Radio. You can't afford to miss it.
From a public locker inside a dilapidated Long Island rail station comes a show designed to piss off liberals using truth, facts, and ridicule. The Lid Radio Show, featuring the conservative voice from the People's Republic of New York, the Lid himself, Jeff Dunitz. Tune in every Wednesday at 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific on the SHR Media Network. Go to shrmedia.com. At Lid Radio, we fight for the truth, justice, and a good kosher T-bone. If you don't listen, Hillary Clinton might sneak into your bedroom in her housecoat late at night and blame you for her election loss. It's the Lid Radio Show with Jeff Dunitz.
Hey girls, Carry Girl Gear is here. More and more women every day are concealed carrying, participating in competitive shooting, and getting firearms training. It's not a boys' club anymore, and we don't have to shop in their stores anymore either. Finally, a cool and unique clothing line just for women. Dope tees and hats for the patriotic concealed carry and 2A girl. So what are you waiting for? Go check out carrygirlgear.com today.
Broadcasting behind enemy lines in occupied California, a mere 2 miles from the state capitol, the bloviating Zeppelin's Berserk Bobcat Saloon radio show can be heard every Tuesday and Thursday night at 8 p.m. Pacific and 11 p.m. Eastern, only on the SHR Media Network. Go to shrmedia.com to listen. You can also watch on the SHR Media Facebook page and the SHR Media YouTube channel. No goldfish were abused in the making of this ad.
Show on the SHR Media Network, Sackheads Against Tyranny. On shrmedia.com. Go there quick like a bunny, 11 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Pacific every Wednesday. Live and direct on the SHR Media Network. shrmedia.com. Be there.
Hey, this is Michael Wright.
And I'm Shannon Wright.
Join us for The Right Way with Shannon and Mike, Monday through Thursday from 7 to 9 a.m. right here on SHR Media.
Why are they joining us?
For fun things like sports, politics.
Oh, maybe some news and entertainment?
And all kinds of other things.
Money and recipes and events, all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, so join us Monday through Thursday, 7 to 9 a.m. here on shrmedia.com.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages. This is the final 25 minutes of the Bloviating Zeppelin's Berserk Bobcat Saloon radio show. And I'm referring and reading the article, What Criminologists Don't Say and Why. And the reason it's important, as we've been talking about in chat, Alaskan and I, is that... For example, Alaskan says, it's obvious these libs are giving criminals an excuse and a defense for their actions. And I said, yeah, exactly, Alaskan. Criminology has now become its own religion, just like the religious left believe in global warming. Facts be damned in both venues. What they're doing is they're taking it on faith. The article I'm referring to was one that was published in the summer of 2017 at cityjournal.org by two guys named John Paul Wright and Matt DeLisi. And I'm going to continue with that. They say liberal political values can shape and distort the research that criminologists do and the public positions that they take. Lee Ellis and Anthony Walsh surveyed several hundred criminologists and found that self-reported ideological perspective was strongly associated with the type of theory that the scholar most advocated often, with liberal criminologists primarily supporting theories that locate the cause of crime in social and economic deprivation. Co-author John Wright has recently collected data showing the political ideology predicts almost perfectly the policy positions of criminologists on issues ranging from gun control to capital punishment to three-strike laws. Liberal criminologists showed almost no variation in their beliefs. Needless to say, they dislike guns, oppose punitive sentences, and vehemently object to the death penalty. I think you're starting to see a common theme here, are you not? Most criminologists follow a penal harm narrative, which seeks to account for all the ways that the criminal justice system hinders the lives of offenders in their communities, generating and reinforcing social inequality, and harming minorities since they are the primary targets. Purveyors of the penal harm narrative assert that conservative legislators demagogically used the upswing in crime rates during the late 20th century, including the more than 20,000 murders and hundreds of thousands of rapes, robberies, and assaults per year, to incite racial animosity and arouse support for overly punitive crime policies. The lawmakers pushed for more police and longer and more uniform criminal sentences, went after gangs and street crime, largely located in minority neighborhoods, and backed increased prison capacity. The result was the era of, quote, mass incarceration. Amazingly, the criminological community could not see that decades of rising American crime rates might have something to do with why the public had supported the adoption of three-strike laws, the imposition of other mandatory minimum sentences, the rise in incarceration rates, and the death penalty. Instead, criminologists stick to the convention that the anti-crime efforts were all about conservatives' eagerness to harm vulnerable minority populations. Hashtag that's what they do. In 2012, the National Academy of Sciences, NAS, commissioned a scholarly review on the growth of incarceration. Leading these efforts was Jeremy Travis, director of the National Institute of Justice under President Bill Clinton, and a senior fellow at the Urban Institute, a liberal think tank. Travis recently stepped down as president of the John Jay College of Criminal Justice and has a long history in, Democratic politics. To assess the evidence on incarceration, he staffed two committees with scholars who had, in one way or another, embraced the penal harm narrative long before the NAS came knocking. Bruce Western, Michael Tonry, and Marie Gottschalk had written damning accounts of the damage supposedly wrought by rising incarceration rates. Tonry, a past president of the ASC, had previously equated incarceration with Guantanamo. Of course, why not Guantanamo? Or CIA rendition programs and torture. Gottschalk had condemned the use of the carceral state as a method to control black populations. Their views dominated the NAS report, which does not differentiate substantially from the arguments of radical left-wing groups like Black Lives Matter. Shocked you are. I can see you slapping your forehead right now. Shocked. Gobsmacked you are. What was achieved by ensuring that violent offenders served 85% of their sentences or more, murderers were sentenced, or that more murderers were sentenced to prison? Not much, according to the report, other than to reward racists. Crime rates, the authors argued, they weren't affected, but incarceration took minority men out of their neighborhoods, stripped them of voting rights, destabilized families, and sapped already paltry economic resources from struggling communities. Such claims could seem plausible only if one believes, contrary to evidence and common sense, that career criminals contribute positively to their neighborhoods, enjoy stable and functional families. They vote, they work. What they did in reality was to prey on their neighbors. In the NAS report and in subsequent publications, Travis stated that a just-the-facts approach to policy assessment should be replaced by normative values in the research process. Well, what values should displace objective evaluation? The answer? Social justice. Scholars cannot claim to be dispassionate analysts when they embrace a social justice agenda from the outset. Agenda-based politics will overrun their scientific objectivity. That seems pretty commonsensical to me. Why not them? Oh, you know why. While promoting the report, Travis and Nicholas Turner, president of the Vera Institute of Justice and Advocacy Organization, published a New York Times op-ed assailing American prisons and holding up the German penal system as a positive exemplar. To be sure, there are significant differences between the two countries, the authors observed. More notably, America's criminal justice system was constructed in slavery's long shadow and is sustained today by the persistent forces of racism. Not only does this statement shed light on the author's ideological views, it also manages to insult anyone who works in the criminal justice system and who values public safety and order. Social justice themes suffuse the NAS report. Consider the author's argument that while crime has gone up and down at different periods, the incarceration rate has never increased so dramatically as it has in the recent years. Well, this is true only in a limited sense. Crime rates didn't vacillate yearly, as the report claims. From 1928 until about 1960, crime rates rose slowly each year. Then during the 1960s, crime rates exploded, launching a 3-decade climb that would culminate in remarkable levels of violence. Oddly enough, I was a detective during those years. Gun crime was at its highest in the 90s. I'm adding. Yet incarceration rates remained flat prior to the 1960s and began to climb only thereafter. By the report's own numbers, prior to 1980, only 40% of individuals arrested for murder were sentenced to prison. And murderers served only an average of 5 years. Less than 10% of those arrested for sexual assaults in 1981 were sentenced to prison, and they spent an average of only 3.4 years behind bars. After sentencing reforms, 92% of convicted murderers were imprisoned for an average of 17 years, and 30% of those arrested for sexual assault were sent to prison for 6.6 years. Somehow the NAS report authors see incarcerating only 40% of murderers as just, and sending more murderers and rapists to prison as unjust. What about the crime reductions associated with locking up more serious offenders or keeping them behind bars longer? This perennially important policy question was apparently too difficult to answer. After presenting a litany of complex statistical issues that complicate these types of analyses, the author stated that we cannot arrive at a precise estimate, or even a modest range of estimates of the magnitude of the effect of incarceration on crime rates. Okay, gauging the impact of any policy is challenging, but it seems untenable that the authors couldn't craft a range of estimates based on various modeling assumptions. Several studies exist that have done just that, including William Spellman's award-winning work, and most show modest crime reductions connected with incarceration. Stephen Levitt of Freakonomics fame, and Thomas Marvell, and Carlisle Moody found that each additional prisoner contributes to reductions ranging from 15 to 30 serious index crimes, which include murder, rape, aggravated assault, armed robbery, burglary, motor vehicle theft, larceny, arson. Unfortunately, criminologists either lack the tools or the abilities to assess the amount of crime prevented through incarceration, or, more likely, they lack the will to do so. Now, to understand why many criminologists refuse to acknowledge criminal behavior as a potent predictor of life outcomes, including premature mortality, death disparities, arrest and incarceration, and even being shot by the police, one must understand that most liberal criminologists feel strangely protective about criminals. Criminologists who work collaboratively with the police have done important work in understanding how best to respond to crime and how to prevent it. Their research, which often includes complex spatial analyses of crime patterns and which targets specific high-rate offenders for arrest and prosecution, has been rigorously evaluated and confirmed. Yet liberal-minded criminologists dismiss these scholars as administrative criminologists, meaning that they help the state impose unfair social and economic arrangements. Liberal criminologists avoid discussing the lifestyles that criminal offenders typically lead. Again, imagine that. Almost all serious offenders are men, and they usually come from families with long histories of criminal involvement, often spanning generations. They show temperamental differences early in life, they begin offending in childhood or early adolescence, and they rack up dozens of arrests. Their lives are chaotic and hedonistic, including the constant pursuit of drugs and sex. They produce many children with different women and rarely have the means or inclination to support them. Active offenders exploit others for their own benefit, including women, children, churches, and the social welfare system. They commit many crimes before getting arrested, and they move in and out of the criminal justice system for decades. Many also report enjoying acts of violence. Let me repeat this because I know this to be true. Many report enjoying acts of violence. The social media accounts of martyred gangsters shot by police often illuminate this subculture. Perhaps, maybe not surprisingly, they see the police as another competing tribe that has to be manipulated, controlled, and sometimes confronted. In some, the lives of persistent criminal offenders are often shockingly pathological. The nature of this world is hard to grasp without witnessing it firsthand. And in 41 years, I certainly have. Unfortunately, criminology has had a long history of suppressing evidence for expressly political reasons. Stop. This is what got me to the article. Criminology has a long history of suppressing evidence for expressly political reasons. For most of its history, the discipline has overtly censored research, for instance, on biological, genetic, and neurological factors that scientists have shown to be associated with antisocial traits and behavioral problems, even today, despite lots of hard scientific evidence, such as that 50% of the variance in antisocial behavior is attributable to genetic factors or neuroimaging studies that show systemic structural and functional brain differences between offenders and non-offenders. Those who pursue this line of research get branded as racists or even eugenicists. We have personally experienced hostile receptions when presenting our work in these areas at professional conferences and have been excoriated in the anonymous review process when attempting to publish our papers. The disciplinary animus toward the study of biological factors extends to other individual factors, including intelligence and personality, and to a range of traits such as callous and unemotional behavior, psychopathy, and self-control. The story, folks, is writing itself, isn't it? When it comes to disciplinary biases, however, none is so strong or corrupting as liberal views on race. Disproportionate black involvement in violent crime represents the elephant in the room amid the current controversy over policing in the United States. Homicide numbers from the Federal Bureau of Investigation, Supplementary Homicide Reports, 1976 to 2005, indicate that young African American males account for homicide victims at levels that are 10 to 20 times greater than their proportion of the population, and account for homicide offenders at levels that are 15 to 35 times greater than their proportion of the population. The black-white gap in armed robbery offending has historically ranged between 10 to 1 and 15 to 1. Even in forms of crime that are allegedly the province of white males, such as serial murder, blacks are overrepresented as offenders by a factor of 2. For all racial groups, violent crime is strongly intraracial, and the intraracial dynamic is most pronounced among blacks. In more than 90% of cases, the killer of a black victim is a black perpetrator. But people are not going to tell you about that. Leftists, Democrats, and essentially the American media maggots are not going to tell you about that, are they? Criminologists talk about the race-crime connection behind closed doors, and often in highly guarded language. The topic is a lightning rod for accusations of racial hostility that can be very professionally damaging. They avoid discussing even explicitly racist examples of black-on-white crime, such as flash mob assaults, polar bear hunting, and the knockout game. What criminologists won't say in public is that black offending differences have existed since data has been collected, and that these differences are behind the racial disparities in arrest, prosecution, and incarceration. Facts in evidence. They also won't tell you that despite claims of widespread racial discrimination in the justice system, legal variables, namely the number of prior arrests and the seriousness of the crime for which the offender has currently been arrested, account for all but a small fraction of the variance in system outcomes. Nor will they tell you the truth about politically correct remedies, such as diversifying police forces, hiring black police chiefs, or training officers in the alleged effects of implicit bias, that these measures won't reduce racial disparities in crime. Now, in the aftermath of the Department of Justice reports on Ferguson and Baltimore, it may sound odd to hear that the system does a good job of processing individuals with comparable criminal backgrounds, similarly, regardless of race. But 50 years of research on the topic have failed to find the smoking gun linking justice system disparities to racism. Claims to the contrary often manipulate data or ignore them altogether. In the case of the DOJ reports, and in the eyes of many criminologists, racism has to be the cause of these disparities, because recognizing the truth about the huge racial imbalance in crime is politically intolerable. The values that characterize an academic community can't help but affect, to some degree, the work of that community, in the case of academic criminology, cutting off research or leading to distorted conclusions. But when entering the realm of public policy, these biases can translate into disastrous consequences for real people. Public safety may be compromised, yes, and valuable and limited resources may be squandered, yes. Under the best circumstances, criminal justice policy confronts a complex and imperfect reality of criminals and their victims. The stakes are too high to accept research tainted by political bias. The hands-off policing now advocated by many liberals doesn't work, and it endangers the lives of police and citizens at the same time that it erodes the legitimacy of law and order. Are we not seeing the direct result of that today? Look in any major newspaper today, in any major urban rat cage. Reliable evidence tells us the most effective strategies to reduce crime involving police, focusing on crime hotspots, targeting active offenders for arrest, and helping to solve local problems surrounding disorder and incivility. Putting predatory, recidivistic offenders in jail or in prison remains the best way to protect the public, especially those who live in high-crime neighborhoods. Lower-level offenders can often be supervised in the community, and many benefit from programs that seek to modify drug and alcohol addictions that contribute to their criminal behavior. Stop. Apply that to the mental health issue and homeless issue and drug issues that we're seeing today, again, in our major urban rat cages. Despite our best efforts, though, most will reoffend and re-enter the system at some point. The current national conversation about criminal justice reform is well-intentioned, but we run the risk of succumbing to passionate rhetoric and to being misled by promises built on flimsy evidence. Gains made in reducing crime have been hard-won, but faulty reform can easily erode them. Its costs will be measured in lost lives and suffering. And who pays for that? Beasy asks. Oh yeah, that's right, the same people that allegedly leftists are attempting to protect. Its costs will be measured in lost lives and suffering. The reality of crime does not easily lend itself to analysis by spreadsheet, nor is it a matter of arcane theory or philosophical principles to those who've been victimized. Reform efforts must recognize these stubborn facts. We encourage policymakers to listen to what criminologists have to say, but we also encourage them to pay attention to what they don't say, which is more often more important. Let's go on to some examples. I've got about 5 minutes left, and I'm not going to get to all of them. I can see that right now. But in California, Governor Newsom has decided that he's going to sign a landmark police use of force bill. And that's because of a case right here in Sacramento. Newsom calls it a tougher new standard, legal standard for the use of deadly force by police. And that was from Assembly Bill 392. And that mandates that cops turn increasingly to de-escalation techniques, including verbal persuasion, weapons other than guns, and other crisis intervention methods, which may work really well when a suspect isn't armed. When a suspect becomes armed, then something else is going to happen. And then there's a lot of political crap that goes on. More training, more money to go into training. Let's tell you the truth, though, about training, because I've seen it for literally decades. In times of fiscal and budgetary crisis, through every department guaranteed, what's the first thing to be cut? In any police department, any sheriff's department. Take a guess. Bueller? Oh, that's right. Training. Definitely. Now, they say that it's a compromise between civil rights advocates who want to limit when police can shoot, and law enforcement groups who said earlier versions of the bill is going to put officers in danger. Well, I think it's going to continue to do that. The new law, which takes effect January 1st, says that police may use deadly force only when necessary in defense of human life. That's a steeper standard than prosecutors apply now, which the standard is officers can shoot when doing so is reasonable. And that is the standard to which you apply is, what would another reasonable officer have done in a situation like that? Now it's not a matter of your being reasonable. Now it's a matter of it was absolutely necessary to do that. Any idea how you think that might turn out? Remember, we had the Philadelphia officers, 5 Philadelphia officers fired at. Now there's another Philadelphia officer fired at in Philadelphia's third shooting incident targeting police in 3 weeks. I wonder where that comes from. A suspect is shot after fighting California deputy for gun in encounter, and that was caught on camera. That just occurred today in the San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department, a 21-year-old guy, and it's on video. You can go see it. The deputies were responding to a domestic disturbance call, and he fought with one of them and tried to snatch her gun, and then, imagine that, he got shot. Then there's this situation, and apparently I think I'm going to have to close the show with this. There's a district attorney, and it should shock you not that this is in Boston, Massachusetts, who tried dropping charges against people who assaulted cops, and there was a judge who denied that motion. Suffolk District Attorney Rachel Rollins, imagine that, imagine her, has accused Boston Municipal Court Judge Richard Sinnott of overstepping his rule after he refused to dismiss charges against many of the 36 protesters who were arrested at a straight pride parade just this past Saturday. 4 Boston police officers were injured during the altercations, and the DA wants to make sure that, prosecutions on people who assault cops, we don't need that, right?
Monsieur has been locked!
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, thanks for listening to the Bloviating Zeppelin's Berserk Bobcat Saloon, live and direct right here on the SHR Media Network. If you want to contact me, you'll find me on Twitter at BZEP, at BZEP, and on my blog at bloviatingzeppelin.net. Promotional consideration is by the Lockheed Martin Skunk Works and the Boeing Company. If it ain't Boeing, I ain't going. And Pratt & Whitney Engines Thrust. You can trust. My tiaras are by My Little Pony. Thanks to my personal KC-135 Kettle 1 refueling team with whom I shall be concerting in less than an hour. Yeah, I know, Jack. Bad potato water. And thank you ever so kindly for listening live tonight. Thanks a ton to Ed Morrissey from hotair.com. Thanks to you for being in chat. Thanks for listening in podcast. I appreciate each and every one of you for taking the time out of your busy day or night or whenever you're listening. I say to you all, have a great weekend. See you next Tuesday. God bless. Take care. Be safe.
Everybody quiet down now and get some sleep.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, Mama. Good night, Ben.
Good night, everyone. Good night, Mama. Good night, Daddy.
Good night, children.
Good night, Daddy. Good night, Elizabeth.
Good night, John Boy. Good night, Jim Bob. Good night, Jim Bob.
Good night, Jim Bob.
What's going on? I was asleep. What's everybody doing?
Good night,
Good night, Jim Bob. Go to sleep.
Good night, and good luck.